Anyway, welcome. Thanks for your time. Yeah, we know that we're asking a lot of people to do a lot of things on the programme at the moment, so we'll try and make this session as useful as possible to make best use of your time. So this session will be to introduce you to the working draft of the programme plan that's being consulted on now. And it is a working draft, so we expect it to change quite a lot as it developed during the consultation period. It's a progression process of the developing the plan, and as you know, our aim is to agree the baseline plan for this programme before year end, and that's important because we don't essentially have a proper programme plan yet. We have a timetable that needs validation through a proper planning process involving all of industry, and that's the way in which we said we would do things. So before I get into the session itself, explain how it's going to run, we have a message from Rachel Clark at Ofgem, who is of course our programme sponsor.
Hello, I'm Rachel Clark and I'm Deputy Director at Ofgem with responsibility for retail systems and processes. I have been ultimately accountable for the implementation of the switching programme, which has now gone live, and I'm the Ofgem programme sponsor for market-wide half-hourly settlement. I want to take a moment to reflect on the importance of the market-wide half-hourly settlement programme and why we are keen to see it implemented as soon as is practically possible. MHHS is a vital step on the way to increasing the flexibility of the electricity system so that we can decarbonise the energy sector in the most cost-efficient way. As such, it provides an essential underpinning of our ability to meet the UK's net zero commitment. And the more efficient use of the energy system that MHHS will facilitate will help to keep the costs of energy down for all consumers. This is more important than ever before at a time when consumers and businesses are facing unprecedented electricity costs. This is why Ofgem considers it imperative that the industry should ensure that implementation of MHHS is done as quickly as possible. When we introduced obligations on all market participants to act in accordance with the transition timetable that we established in April last year, we wanted to be clear that we expect all market participants to prioritise implementation of MHHS in such a way that they can support a swift implementation. We cannot afford this programme to be held back because some parties do not appreciate the urgency for implementation. As was envisaged, the programme is now carrying out a full plan review to establish a detailed, robust, credible and achievable plan for MHHS implementation. Ofgem supports this plan review. It is essential that the programme has a considered, evidenced and robust plan that all parties can believe in and operate in accordance with. It is also essential that this plan, when finalised, delivers the quickest achievable route to implementation. In support of that, I have asked MHHSP to press all of you on what the minimum timescales are for activities and to look for all possible ways of minimising the time to go live without jeopardising the fundamental requirement for a robust, credible and achievable plan. We expect all programme participants to apply the necessary resources and the necessary priority to implementing MHHS so that this important change can be delivered as soon as possible and start delivering the expected consumer and market benefits. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this critical programme.
Okay, back to the deck. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Right, let's talk to the agenda that we're going to go through. This deck is, I'm going to walk you through the deck, which was one of the artifacts that we published on Monday, but this is about bringing it to life a little bit, a bit of a conversation. So if I could ask you, as we go through this, hold your questions until the end. We're going to have at least 20, based on experience, probably 30 minutes available at the end, where people can ask questions through hands up. So if you could hold on to those until then, that'd be good, because as we go through deck, we may in fact answer questions you may have. Some people are not on mute. If you possibly mute, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Right, so the agenda is as established. So can we go to the next slide, please? So we're going to start with an introduction to the objectives of the planning exercise and the consultation process and the principles that we're following in developing the plan. So on the next slide, that's just the place marker telling you what the document's about. And then, right, so let's just go through this specifically. So the objectives of the replanning exercise are aligned to what Rachel was saying originally. We need to consult with you on the plan, and we need to assess ways in which to ensure the plan is set up to meet the timetable if possible, and certainly to be delivered as soon as is possible. And this process should yield a baseline programme plan that can be approved by Ofgem on the weight of predominantly most participants agreeing that this plan is the best way to deliver the programme. So we want to work with industry to develop the plan. We don't want to, from a programme central team perspective, impose the plan on you. And this whole process, and I'll develop this as we go through, is about working with you and expecting you to help us provide the evidence and the backup to justify whatever timeline and whatever plan we come up with. And it's very different in that respect at the outset from some other programmes in the past. So we're trying to learn lessons and build that approach. I think we've still got some non-muted parties on the call. So the plan as it is so far, it is a working plan. It's a draft based on the best information we have. It's not been approved by Ofgem. It's really imperative to challenge all the timelines and assumptions. It is as a result of a left to right plan, which is the start of a planning process. But round one is about them putting a right to left pressure and test on the plan to see how we can be more efficient about delivering this. And basically to deliver a programme which enables the benefits that are expected to be realised by Ofgem, but the programme doesn't do the benefit realisation. It just enables the ability then for industry to yield those benefits that are expected by the business case. So that's basically the setting out of it. And then if we go to the next slide, I wanted to talk about the consultation process. So we've had a pre-consultation stage, which was May to July, where we had some volunteer PMs from industry parties working with us in what we call a planning working group. And as a result, we've managed to knock some rough edges off the plan that we sent out and published on Monday. There's still got a lot of background noise. I don't know whether it's echoing back through somewhere. In round one, this is the real kind of test of engagement with industry, actually. Round one is where we need you to make the effort to make a difference in the plan, because round one is about getting the structure of the plan right, the approach right, the durations of activities set in the right way, and the sequencing of activities right. It's about testing the high-level assumptions and risks. It's not a focus on absolute dates at this stage. The dates will drop out as we go through the process. We shouldn't be data obsessed at this stage. We should be approach obsessed. And the important thing in round one in these 4 weeks of consultation is that we want you to give us as much information and the thinking that you have to give us the backup and the ammunition to build a case for whatever timeline might turn out to be the case as we develop through round two. So we make no apologies for the fact that we have set out quite a lot of consultation questions for you to answer. I think there's 57 questions, but some of those are yes, no, and then there are subsidiary questions. But we're trying to lead you to give us the thinking and the challenge to the way we're thinking at this stage to enable us to join up and continue to be working together with collective ownership on the plan as it develops. And we are intending to bring the volunteers back at the back end of round one and setting up towards round two, and again at the end of round two, because we want to continue this collective ownership and building in the plan, and we want the volunteers to give us information that might be helpful. We want to give parties the inside track on what's going on with the plan, so that it doesn't look at any point as if it's being built in a darkened room with a few programme team members deciding what should happen. And I think we've evidenced through the last 3 months that we are trying to do what we promised, which is to engage with you on a constructive basis. And by putting out a left to right plan in a way, we're setting out a challenge for ourselves in aligning all our stakeholders. And we do need to find ways to pull that timeline back in, as Rachel was saying earlier. So really, round one is where the effort goes in. It's where you can make a difference. It's where you can influence the plan. If you don't engage properly in round one and you wait until round two, you kind of miss the boat to a degree in making major changes to the plan. It's going to be more refinement and polishing in round two. And in that sense, the ability for you to kind of change things becomes lessened as we go through this process. So I'll just make that point. Round one, please make the effort. I know it's difficult. I know you're engaged in looking at the design artifacts, but the plan as we know it, it's been something that we all need to sign up to and be comfortable about going into next year. And therefore it's going to be worth the effort at this stage. And we've tried to make it easy for you by articulating the questions and the information that we really like to get from you at this point. So I'd love to be overwhelmed by a tsunami of documents coming back over the next 4 weeks that we have to deal with. The more you can give us, the better it will become. So I liken round one to deciding where the pitch is, and round two is deciding what the game is, if you like, and what game we're playing. So let's all get on the same pitch in round one. That's the key thing. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Very quickly, you've seen it before this one. It's the principles that we are trying to follow. I hope over the last 3 months we are following. And again, just drawing your attention to the last one, industry shaped. This plan should be industry shaped, and that's what we're seeking to achieve by working with you in the coming weeks. Moving on, planning terminology. Very briefly, we're sure that a lot of this terminology is familiar to many people, but we have established through playback sessions we've been having today that some people have appreciated us going through the terminology because they were unsure about some of it. So let's just briefly cover the topics. So control points, these provide the demarcation between the big phases of the program, for example, between DBT and integration testing, for example. And a control point is a decision to be made. It's not a checkpoint. It's a decision where we decide whether or not to stop, pause, or proceed in the program at those points. It's an opportunity to take a step back and look at the health of the program. So the control points are points where the program director will chair a review of the health of the program, and will assess things like the amount of change going on, the level of risk the program is carrying, the suitability of the forward plan, the readiness of participants. It'll also be a place where we refresh the delivery and change strategies, and we assess the progress towards achieving the program outcomes. So it's a proper drains-up review of the program to give you confidence, because it's a collective determination that the program is healthy enough and in control enough to proceed or not. So we want to make it a proper, meaningful decision, and the control points are set, as you'll see in the plan on a page later, are key points in this program. Milestones are easier. They're a familiar device to kind of provide a focus to delivery activities and provide points of control on delivery. And in our working draft of the planning artifacts, we've set out a milestone register which identifies the basic names of the key milestones, the tiers at which they're going to be governed, and also the milestone dependencies. So where one milestone is dependent on another, the milestone register has called those things out as well. But the milestones in the register will be defined and rounded out and developed more fully for round two. So if I can then move on to this slide. Yeah, so critical paths and critical threads. Again, some of you will be familiar. The key question is the path to where. So the critical path is the path to go live. The critical threads are the paths between control points. And what we're trying to do by determining those paths is work out which activities, which if they are delayed, will directly impact the schedule of the program. So if anything is on a critical thread or a critical path and it is delayed, it will directly impact the timeline. And therefore, we use those paths and those threads to allow us to focus on activities that absolutely mustn't slip. These concepts were introduced in faster switching, for example, and we'll continue to build on that approach for this program. Readiness assessments themselves will support the control points and other key points in the program, not just the control points, and they'll provide that top-down check on participants' readiness to go along with the SI's bottom-up assurance that we'll be doing to establish participants' progress and readiness. So we have that readiness check, which is the high level one, and we've got the assurance activities, which is the lower level ones, both of them combining to give us all confidence that things are tracking as they should as we go through the programme. We're using a fairly tried and tested process for readiness assessments, and we're seeking always to try and balance the workload of a readiness assessment with the value of the information we're asking for. So we recognise that often with readiness assessments you have to go through internal governance to get them done, and therefore we try to make them as light as possible but sufficiently valuable to be of use to us. So we're continuing to operate readiness assessments in that way. So we can move on to the next slide. Briefly on the planning artefacts, we'd like to just make sure everybody's aware of the artifact, which ones you've got this time round and which ones you're going to get next time round. So what we've provided you with this time is actually a combination of the plans on a page and the planning raid summary. We put it in one document because for round one, where people are getting familiar with the plan, we want people to look at the plan on page in the context of the raid items, which makes sense. And obviously these are planning raid items. The raid items most relevant to the production and development of the plan. If you want to see the wider programme raid, as you know, you can now see that through the portal and the digital PMO, where you can go into the raid, the programme raid log, and slice and dice the information however you like. So that's a really good improvement that we've made recently in the portal. So you'll get 1 and 6. You've got 1 and 6 as one document. You've got the programme schedule as an Excel document. You've got the milestone register as an Excel document. And you've got the deck I'm going through at the moment. So we think for round 1 that's sufficient. And actually artefacts 4, 5 and 7 are not necessary for round 1, but we will be providing them in round 2. We just want to focus you on this, high level articulation of the plan at this stage, and we want to make the exercise as streamlined as possible. Of course, the other artifact we provided you with is the set of consultation questions that we want you to answer. Okay, moving on. I talked briefly about levels and hierarchy. So it's important to understand how the programme plan will be governed and how the plan and its milestones are linked to governance forums and decision making. So on the next slide, we've basically articulated levels of milestone, which we call tier. We didn't want them levels because governance have levels and they don't match entirely. So your level 2 steering group manages tier 1 milestones, and your level 3 advisory groups manage tier 2 and 3 milestones as articulated here. I'm not going to go into great detail on this slide, but you can see it there for reading on your own time. But on the next slide, we just kind of made that clearer. Programme steering group govern tier 1 milestones, and if the milestones slip beyond a certain point, they get escalated to Ofgem as well. Ofgem are an attendee in the PSG, and therefore they get sight of all tier 1 milestones and their progress in any case. And then tier 2 and 3 are done at the advisory group level, so nothing really difficult, or we don't spend a lot of time on that one. So if we move on to the most boring slide in the pack, this is just how we name milestones. So the milestone naming tells you the tier where the milestone will be governed. It tells you the area of the programme or the work stream in which the milestone is relevant. And then there's a numbering system that follows it. So it's just to make it very clear when you look at a milestone number, where it is and how it's managed. So moving on, we're getting to the core part of the presentation now, which is the overview of the plan. So we want to explain what the working draft of the plan is. We want to explain how we're approaching the delivery and what obstacles and potential obstacles and areas of uncertainty we see at this point, because there are quite a few, as you might expect. To remind you, this plan is a high-level document to just get your idea about structure, sequencing, durations, and test the key assumptions and risks. And round 1 and looking at this plan is not focused on the dates. The dates will come out from this round 1 process and will be the focus of round 2. So if we go to the next slide, which is the overall plan on the page. I've got some general points to make before Kate takes over from me for a while. This plan that we're talking about, the replan, I wouldn't call it a replan, I'd call it a plan, actually, because we don't yet have a fully fledged industry-owned plan to meet any kind of timetable at this point. But on this plan, it starts from M5, M3. That's the point at which it starts, and then we move forward. And it acknowledges and accommodates the fact that whilst many parties may have started doing their impact assessments, the high-level impact assessments, and they may be looking at their IT procurement activities, there are some parties that may not have started yet, and may in fact not start until M3. So we've had to accommodate some timing for that, which Kate will go into more detail on in a minute. We've accommodated the fact that some parties will go through SIT and some will not. And so we've kind of shown a different path through the plan from that respect, and we've outlined the central systems separately as well. So there are core central capabilities that are delivered either by central parties or others, but that are absolutely essential for going into SIT, and those are accommodated within the plan as well. So we've set out some assumed timelines for participants' DBT based on a range of feedback we've had from volunteers in the planning working group. There were one or two outliers. There was one party I think said it would take a lot longer than this, and there was one that said it would take a lot less time than this. But this is primarily where the kind of range of timing that we heard from the volunteers, and we've taken back end the DBT off the critical path, and really focused on the DBT that is required for the interfacing systems that would be going into SIT. And again, we'll explain a bit more about this in a minute. We've outlined where qualification testing may start, but just to say that it starts when key parts of SIT are complete, but it does not have to wait until all of SIT is complete. And migration and go live are based on some very broad assumptions at the moment, which are highly arguable and need to be worked on in the coming weeks as we go through round one of consultation. So I'm going to hand over to Kate, who may have some further comment on this overall plan before she then goes into more of the detail. Thanks, Kate.
Keith. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I'll talk through this a little bit. I'll talk through some of the rationale behind the sequencing and the timing and what's on the critical path, and then we'll drop down into a bit more detail and look at some of the key assumptions and key risks and so on that are associated with each phase of the plan. So what we've got in this is that we've right along the bottom, we've got what we're calling the different phases of the programme. So we've got system design and build, which is distinct from end-to-end design, which is what's been going on up until now. So system design and build is from the end of October up until the beginning of systems integration test, SIT. And then we've got integration testing, which goes up until the beginning of qualification. And there will be some residual SIT going on, but we've called the phase qualification because it started at that point. And then again, the migration period starts and qualification ends. The qualification phase ends when the first cut over to live happens, and then you've got the migration period up until the end of migration, and then which is M15, and then eventually M16 when there's cut over to the new timetable. So what you've got at the top is you've got the existing Ofgem transition timetable milestones. We haven't put in the text. You can see that on the transition timetable, but these are the existing milestones. We've got the 4 swim lanes, and we've divided it into SIT and non-SIT so that people can clearly see what happens if they are looking to participate in SIT, and what the difference is if they're not. And then you've got the central systems, as Keith said, at the bottom, and then all of that comes together in the 3rd swim lane when we're preparing for cutover and migration. So just starting off with the first swim lane with the SIT participants. So in the planning working groups, what you've told us is that you will need approximately 4 months to, once the design has been signed off, to do some planning and to finish off your impact assessments. And that the planning you'll do is a couple of things. There'll be a detailed plan in the for short-term activities, and then there'll be a high-level overall program plan for the whole of the program. So there will be potentially some procurement in there if you're procuring new services, or even if you're renegotiating contracts with existing suppliers. So that we've allowed for that procurement to carry on a bit, but we've said that, okay, if you're going to take 4 months to, I think it was 3 to 4 months to do the planning, then you'll be in a position to start your DBT at the end of that 3-4 months. And then we've allowed a 12-month period for design, build and test of enough of your systems to go into SIT. And by that, I mean that this would cover development of metering services, data services, registration services, network operation services, and UMSO. So those obviously are needed for SIT. But in addition to that, for suppliers, the development of or changes to your market interfaces. So what we wouldn't be expecting of suppliers at this point is that you've done all of the development and that you have changed your CRMs, you've changed your sales systems, you've changed your customer correspondence, you've changed your billing, all of that stuff. Absolutely not expected at that point. It's not what we're going to be testing in SIT. SIT is testing in an end-to-end sense, but in an end-to-end sense of end-to-end of the MHHS design. It's not testing in an end-to-end sense of all of the supplier systems. So we've then put a separate bar on the Gantt chart for DBT of back-end systems, which can go on much longer, and that would go on in parallel with SIT. So we've then got SIT going on for just over 18 months. And what we've said, as Keith described, is that as soon as we've got to a point where we think that we've broadly validated that the functionality is as per the design and it's all holding together, then we will open up the end-to-end sandbox for SIT participants to do testing, so that they'll still be required to do some testing in SIT, although not potentially right to the end of SIT, because there'll be some things at the end like operational testing for the DIP, which we would look to do without wider participation. But there'll be some parallelism between SIT participants testing with us in SIT and what you may be doing on the end-to-end sandbox. So then we've got time spent on the end-to-end sandbox, testing that, finishing off SIT, and then we drop into, on the third swim lane, advanced and unmetered prepare for cutover to live for several months. And, you know, sandbox testing is going on still at that point. There'll be plenty of opportunity. And then it drops into advanced and unmetered cutover. And this is M13 and M11. And they go live. And then there's a 13-month migration period where MPANs are progressively moved over onto the new arrangement. So just to be clear, because I think it maybe not all of you have been too much involved in the program up until now. When we say M11 and M13 and advanced and unmetered go live, what we mean is that all of the participants in those segments have gone live with their new market-wide half-hourly capabilities. That's not to say that they've got any MPANs operating in market-wide half-hourly at that point, but from that point on, crucially, any MPAN which switches to them or any new registration, they can put that MPAN live under the new arrangements. And then the point of the migration period is that bit by bit, all of the rest of the participants' MPANs get moved over from the existing arrangements to the new arrangements. And we've got a similar thing happening with smart and non-smart, that the smart segment goes live a couple of months later. And again, you've got a migration period where all of the existing MPANs get moved over to the new settlement arrangements. I'll come on and talk a little bit more about migration in a minute, but let's just look at what happens to non-SIT participants in central systems. So central systems first. So central systems, 12-month design, build and test in the same way as SIT participants, and then central systems SIT for the same period, and then preparation for live, and then going live. Now, this bottom swim lane, we've just bucketed all the central systems together. We haven't distinguished. Obviously, some may go live well before that, and that's fine, and the functionality is just sitting there not used. But what we've said is that all central systems, the latest date by which they will be live is a month before advanced and unmetered go live, just to let things settle down a little bit. So the central systems here are Elexon central systems, smart metering, DSP, etc., CSS, DTN for changes to the DTN, and obviously the DIP. And something that's recently been added into the sort of system architecture diagram, where the scope of MHHS is shown in a pink shape, which I'm sure some of you will be familiar with. We've recently added into that EES, because there will be changes to EES or ECOs, as was, and those will need to be tested. And so that's also a central system which will be part of this. So you in the DNO and iDNO community, we consider to be participants. Now, clearly, we need at least some DNOs or iDNOs or potentially St. Clement's to participate in SIT. That discussion needs to be bottomed out properly. So that's one of the things about SIT that we haven't quite got to yet, but we will get there in the next few months. So non-SIT participants, the start, if you're not going the SIT route, is exactly the same. You do some planning and so on, and then drop into DBT in the same way. Now, what we've shown here is we've shown a similar split between market interfaces and services and back-end systems. It's a bit artificial. You know, essentially what needs to happen is, if you're a non-SIT participant, you have to be ready to participate in qualification and to complete qualification in time to go live with your relevant segment. So, you know, just for the sake of argument, we've said interfaces for 14 months and then back-end systems for longer, and the two, one follows the other. That's not necessarily the case, but just for planning purposes to represent it, that's what we've done. So then you come to the point where qualification starts. So we've allowed 12 months for qualification, and this is something that where we need to do a bit more due diligence during this round of consultation, because we've had varying estimates of how long it will take to qualify. And And we also have not yet fleshed out exactly what will be necessary to qualify. So this is where I give a plug for the qualification working group, which is starting next week. The first meeting's on Tuesday. So there are a lot of important questions to answer about qualification, and that's the forum in which they'll be answered. So if you are interested, and we'd welcome as much participation as possible, please get in touch with the PMO, and then you can be part of that working group. Even if you can't attend all sessions, you know, if you can be on the list as a participant and attend the ones that you can, that would be very helpful. So qualification, execution, 12 months. So we do need to validate that. So let me just briefly describe what we're thinking in terms of qualification at the moment. And really, all of this is up for grabs. It really all needs to be fleshed out. So we are thinking that qualification will have 3 elements. So the first element will be that you will be expected to do certain tests in your pre-integration test in your PIT, and to have some evidence that you've done them. And those will be around the interface, market interfaces and services. So it's not around back-end systems, it's about market interfaces and services to make sure that you've got that working correctly. Now, the way that responsibilities split as far as qualification goes is that obviously the program's implicated in some things, so is the BSc PAB, but so are SECAS and RETCO. So we've been having discussions with the BSc PAB about the shape of things, and what's on the table at the moment is that the BSc PAB will run qualification, manage it, assure you as you go through qualification and so on, give you a tick in the box on what you've done in PIT such that you can then go into qualification and just be responsible for all of that. What we'll do as a programme is we will work with the BSc PAB to define what's necessary for qualification. So we do the upfront work and then they do the running and managing and so on. And as I said, we need to involve SEC and REC because not all roles in MHHS are subject to the BSc. So first bit of qualification being PIT and getting a tick in the box for the right things. Now, we don't yet know what those are, but those will be defined in due course. Second part is to actually use our UIT environment, which will be provided as a testing service in the same way as the UIT environment was for smart metering. It'll be a testing service, and you will use that to run some qualification tests. And that will be, again, monitored by the PAB, and we'll be asking you to run details of what you've executed, to put those details into ADO so that it can all be tracked centrally. And then once you've done the tests, it will be up to the PAB to give you a tick in the box for that. So that's fairly standard, and that's pretty similar to both smart metering and faster switching. So the slightly different thing that we're going to do, and we haven't yet settled on how we're going to do it, is we would like to get some confirmation in informal testing and informal assurance that participants have changed their business processes and procedures and changed the systems that support them. And now we're talking about the back end systems in such a way that it will properly support market-wide half-hourly. So, you know, we want to know that your exceptions processing for MPANs that fail to move during the migration process, that exception processing is robust and will be able to deal with the anticipated numbers. all sorts of things like that. And we want to gain a gauge of that. Now, how we do that is up for grabs. It could be that you provide some evidence of testing or some assertions that you've done things, and that will happen later on in the qualification piece. Or it could be that you use the UIT environment to do that testing and evidence it. We're not sure, but the idea is very firmly that we're not just looking at interface testing here. We are looking at, in a bit more of a holistic manner, at what a participant's business processes are and making sure that they're going to be fit for purpose when you go live. So then coming down from qualification, obviously the end-to-end sandbox environment on which qualification and the sandbox, sorry, the UIT environment on which the end-to-end sandbox and the qualification will be run will be an enduring environment. It doesn't just stop. But what we've done for planning purposes here, just to represent it, we're showing that qualification stops as far as this program goes, because then you drop into live running. Obviously, that isn't the case. It goes on in the background for new entrants and so on. But just to represent how the plan gets to its end point, we've cut it off there when live running starts. So you come down and you have unmetered and smart going live, and then you have the migration. Right, so the cutover and the migration. So what we've done for planning purposes is we've put in some assumptions about how the go live will happen, such that there's a consistent, such that the go live happens in a way that's consistent with the existing design. And what I mean by that is that we've said that advanced and unmetered go live on a certain date, which is represented by the M11, M13, and that all participants for those segments will go live on that date. So there's not a sort of a gradual, like a period of 3 or 4 months where early ones go at M11 and M13 and later ones can come online with their modified systems during the next 3 or 4 months. We've said all participants are ready on that date. The whole segment is MHHS capable from that date. And the same goes for the smart segment, all going at the same time at M12, M14. Now, this is a bit different from what the Ofgem transition timetable said, and it's a bit different from what the CCDG, which was looking at this last year, it's a bit different from what they recommended. Now, the CCDG was showing that there was a period of 3 or 4 months over, where early adopters go early, and then the rest of the market has got 3 or 4 months to come online before M14. And M14 is the date where everyone in the market affected by MHHS is live with their new systems. And from that point, the entire market is capable of taking on a new MPAN under the new MHHS arrangements. Now, the problem with having a period over which entrants just come into the market like this in a given segment is that there's nothing in the design at the moment whereby if an MPAN has migrated to the new market-wide half-hourly, that MPAN can be switched back. So if the MPAN is with a supplier who's fully MHHS capable and then switches away to a supplier who's not yet on the new arrangements, that MPAN would have to somehow reverse migrate to the old arrangements. Well, there's no mechanism for that at the moment. And what CCDG said was, we're not going to have reverse migration. You know, we're just not going to do it. And in this period, there would be potentially restricted consumer choice, whereby if an MPAN has migrated, then it has to stay on the new arrangements. It can't go back. Now, there are some stakeholders who are rather concerned about this and think that the restriction in consumer choice that would mean would be A, very confusing, and B, very restrictive and anti-competitive and all the rest of it. So that because of these concerns, and because this issue has not yet been resolved, we've gone, for the purposes of round one of this plan, we've gone with the idea that in a given segment, all participants go live on a certain date. Now, we're working on this in the migration working group. We're also working on it in the background, looking at alternatives, and we think that this is highly likely to change. We don't know how, but what we really want to get to is we do want to get to a situation where there is a number of months available for early starters to start at the beginning and for other participants to come in during that period, leading up to M14 when everybody's MHHS capable. Right, migration period, 13 months and 11 months for SMART. Again, this is something that we do need to do a bit more due diligence on over the next few weeks. One of the things we're going to look at is some of the big solars that have happened recently. And we're not yet sure that we understand whether there will be system constraints, you know, dictating the timeline of this, or whether the constraints will more come from the exceptions processing, where an MPAN's data is not clean enough to get it to move over. It's got to be manually processed in some way. So there's work ongoing on that at the moment. What is likely is that the migration is going to have to be controlled. So, and that is something that will be done by the programme. And the likely scenario is that suppliers will be given ranges of the number of MPANs that they can move in different periods. And the idea there is to make sure that the migration is smooth, so that agents who are exiting the market, agents who are coming in, DNOs and iDNOs particularly, and obviously relevant to you guys, don't get swamped. And, you know, I mean, having an MPRS being knocked over because all of a sudden there's a huge bow wave in a particular day of agent de-appointments and appointments and things like that would not be good. So we will have a part to play in that, in making sure that that happens smoothly and doesn't adversely affect any of your systems in particular. Right, I think that's it on that slide. Do you want to move on, Danielle? So this is a little bit more detail on system design, build and test. You can see how after M5 there's planning and so on, and then there's the design, build and test, and then preparation for SIT, which leads up to the to the milestones, which then, or control points, which then move into SIT. Go down. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to pick out a few issues, assumptions and risks. The transition or migration design, transition and migration, the terminology is being, up until now, is being used on the programme a bit interchangeably. So the migration working group is quite keen to see it standardised so that transition applies to the whole period from now right up until the end, when the new settlement timetable comes into effect. And that migration refers to the migration period where MPANs are being moved over in the sort of almost the final part of the transition. So the migration design will not be ready by M5. I think it's fairly widely known what the bones of that are, and the design team will work on that as quickly as they can. There's a typo there that we can correct in in dubs. And then just moving down to the assumptions, I think you all know that you're responsible for your own pit. There will not be a DIP environment ahead of SIT. However, one thing I didn't mention on the overall Gantt was that while pit is your responsibility, we are going to try to do some things that will help you. And the idea there is that if we can do something centrally that's useful to all of you, then we'll try and do it, particularly if it's something that you're not already likely to have. So the two things that fall into that category are, first of all, having some kind of simulator which will simulate the interaction that a data service will have with the Elexon central systems. So where the data service would interact with the load shaping service or with the market-wide data service, we will produce a simulator which can act as, you know, the sync for messages or for sending out load shapes into the data service. So that's in progress at the moment. We're just designing that. And so it will look like the DIP interface. We're not going to have things on it like security certificates, but it will simulate the way the interaction with the DIP will work for those services. We're looking at potentially doing it for more services, and that's a kind of work in progress at the moment. The other thing that we're going to do to help in your PIT is we're going to, and again, this is more around data services, but you know, potentially you guys could use it. I don't know. It's around generating large quantities of consumption data. And this is just the data. This isn't sort of the means to inject this data in, but you know, say you provide a list of 10,000 MPANs that you're using in your PIT system, and we generate realistic consumption data for those. Potentially. Now, you know, there's a lot more to it than that. We'll need the last consumption data, the technical details, all sorts of bits and pieces, but an easy way to generate realistic data, which hopefully will prove useful in the testing. And then assumptions and risks, a lot are about the transition and migration and so on. How long participants' builds will take. So when you've undertaken your detailed planning, we will do a bit of a checkpoint with you to say, okay, we know that in doing this replan activity, and by October, we'll have firmed up dates for how long we expect the design, build and test to take, how long for SIT and so on. But you won't at that point have done your detailed planning or indeed your planning for the whole program. So when you've done that in sort of 4 months after the end of October, we will do a bit of a checkpoint to say, okay, guys, you know, this is what the plan says. Is your planning supporting that, or are there any issues, so that we can head them off if there are. Okay, I think that will do on that one. So let's go on to the next one. Integration testing, right? So at this level, this is the top level, and all you see is SIT being done in a block. What you will see if you go into the Excel and expand it out and see all of the activities, then you'll be able to see the different SIT stages, how we are proposing to sequence them, how they interact and so on. Okay, and then I think moving on. Okay, so key issues. SIT is on the critical path. We need to validate its duration. We've planned its duration at the moment based on experience of other programs. We do need to do a bit more work on that, and any opinions that you have would be very valuable. We haven't got any firmed up volunteers for SIT, but we've got some people who have expressed interest, which is great. I think for you as a community, we probably need to initiate some discussion with the community generally, together with St. Clement's, to work out what's the best approach. Now, in various working groups, it's been pointed out that the approach used in faster switching worked well, where St. Clement's actually did the testing on behalf of you guys in SIT. And then I think there were some volunteer parties from amongst you who then did, sorry, that was SIT functional. And then for the non-functional, there were some volunteer parties from you, and also potentially for some of the other stages, like maybe migration or something like that, would be useful to get one of you to volunteer. So we will initiate those as soon as we can. Assumptions, yeah, that's all straightforward. SIT volunteers, too many or too few. I think as far as you guys are concerned, I'm hoping that we'll be able to reach a consensus on who does what in SIT relatively easily. It's a bit harder to see for the suppliers, because a lot of suppliers have indicated that they need quite a long time to do their development. So that might be a bit harder, but for you guys, I'm hoping it should be okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, qualification. So again, not a huge amount to see on this one. Qualification starts and goes on for 12 months, and then we move into going live with advanced and unmetered segments. And go on to the next slide, Danielle. Okay, qualification, right. So what I did, I talked about the ideas that we've got so far. What I didn't talk about were some of the unknowns. So, and they are many. The first thing is, are we talking about qualification or are we talking about requalification? Obviously, they're quite different. Some of the other things that we need to firm up are the scope, and less relevant for you guys, but more relevant in the kind of the data services area, is what is the unit of qualification? In other words, you know, what which component on the overall diagram of the architecture, which component has to qualify? So if you know, for example, does a smart data service have to qualify as a whole, or can you qualify as a processing service piece individually in that within the smart data service? But I think for you guys, relatively straightforward. Yeah, and then we need to firm up responsibilities and talk to the different codes responsible and so on. Qualification testing, timelines, yeah, we need to firm up on those. Okay, next one, Danielle. And then migration. So this is once unmetered and advanced have gone live, then you can see that after a couple of months, Smart goes live, And then you've got the migration period, which ends in M15, where the migration is complete. And then the only thing left to do, which is on the high level diagram, but not on this one, which is M16, which is then the cutover to the new settlement timetable, which is intended in our plan. We've got that happening a couple of months after M15 to give a bit of preparation time. And then next slide. Yeah, so we've talked about the migration approach and what we've assumed and how that's likely to change. I think that's the main thing in here. Yeah, there are some dependencies like data cleansing and adding data items, you know, which obviously directly affect you because these new data items will have to be added into MPRS. So those activities and responsibilities for those and how they're run and managed, again, is something we're working on at the moment. And I think that's it. Is that it, Danielle? And then it's the glossary and back over to Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Yeah, just at the last slide actually on this pack is just a summary glossary on the last page, and to remind you that there's a kind of big interactive glossary on the portal that people use. In fact, I use it quite a lot too. So for a lot of the acronyms, for anybody that's struggling with them, please go and look at the glossary on the portal. So I think you'll understand that what we're trying to do here is be really open and honest and transparent with you about what we know and what we don't know at this stage in the game and what we need from you, particularly at this point. And we could have waited longer and been more certain about some of these things and engaged you later, but that wasn't what we promised to do. We promised to allow you to engage with us upstream on this process so that you have an opportunity to influence the shape and form of the plan before it gets too far down the road and it becomes increasingly more difficult for you to influence it. So whilst you will be replying to the consultation questions, and as I said earlier, it's really important that you put the effort into round one particularly. We've explained that there's some areas that we need to work on in terms of our own due diligence to kind of sort out the migration approach, the situations and so on. So the stuff that you at least now are aware we are working on during this round one timeline, so that between us, we can individually and collectively dispel some of the broad assumptions and uncertainty of the plan and try to get to something which is more recognisable and more settled, so that we can go into round two consultation with, you know, a better version of the plan with clear timelines in it. And even during round two, there will still be work going on to settle these assumptions and get to a point where we're confident that we can baseline the plan. One would expect that anyway, when we have baselined the plan, there'll still be assumptions and risks and so on in it. That's the nature of the planning process, and therefore nobody can expect that a plan once baseline will never change. It'll just be progressively clearer and more certain as we go through the program, and actually the changes should be less significant and easier to manage. So hopefully it's a recognisable as an approach, and hopefully you all can support the way we're trying to do these things. And we are, as I say, trying to work with you to build this plan. So we're now into a Q&A session where, as I said, if people want to raise hands and ask questions that you've been holding on to until now, then please go ahead. We've got about 24 minutes to cover any questions coming from the floor. So Jacqueline, I think you're first.
Yes, this is a really baby question, I appreciate, but back on slide 23, you had a picture and you had a number of numbers, and it was start from M5, etc. But there was a series of numbers, and I couldn't work out what those numbers mean.
You mean like M9 and M10?
No, I understand what those are, but if you can just go back to slide 23, And you will, yeah, that will do it. So you see these numbers here, start relative to M5,
Yeah.
31.1.
Months.
What does that mean?
Months. So
31.1 months after M5.
M5 is assuming that CR9 is approved, then M5 is end of October. So we're saying that it's for example, start relative to M5 is 40.6 months. It's 40.6 months after that date.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm sure that'll be carried on throughout of all of it, because it didn't make any sense to me, but I do now. Thank you.
The reason, as I said, is because we're trying to focus on start, end, duration and sequencing without being distracted by dates at this point, because it's quite easy to get into conversation about, well, why is it February, why is it not March, and so on. That's really more focused for round 2 of the consultation. So that's the way we've done it this way.
No, that's fine. I know that now. Thank you very much.
Fine, no problem. Thank you, Jacqueline. Who's next? I think it's Alex.
Thanks, guys. Actually, you answered a lot of my questions going through it, so it's very good. I'm glad you're sort of taking, or a proposed different approach to the migration and things, because I didn't think that was particularly practical when I first read the AWG's output. But one aspect I was then looking at, and I know you've still got to think about this, is that we would still sort of have parallel running of our MPRS systems, wouldn't we, for different, smart, the CT, AMR, UMS sort of be. So for periods of time, we would be asked to deal with MPANs in different ways, as it were.
I don't think you'd be asked to deal with MPANs in different ways as far as MPRS goes. What has to happen is that MPRS needs to be upgraded before before we can go live with this. And some of the things, well, the main thing that needs to happen is that there are certain data items that need adding into it. And then obviously they need populating and so on. But I think once they are there, then you communicate with MPRS, in the standard way. Well, sorry, you will need to communicate. MPRS will use some communication on the DIP, but the way you communicate with it should be pretty standard.
I was thinking, because if you think, say Smart goes first, I can't remember on your plan. Smart goes first, CT metering goes a period later. Yeah. We would have to have rules written into and process written into MPRS that would say this MPAN is a CT meter. Do not accept, an appointment of a new agent.
Exactly.
And so that's the parallel running I was looking for. We'd have to get some claimants to build logic in to look at MPRS for periods that aligned with it.
So that's, that's exactly why we've proposed this approach where we're saying for a given segment, everybody's live at the same date, because that's not there at the moment. What you've just described, this rule that says, these guys are on MHHS, these guys aren't, therefore you can, all that difficult stuff. That's not there. So we've just gone for simple, recognizing that will probably change,
That's good.
But yeah. Now it's all, so your input in the migration working group or anything like that, love to have you there. You can, we can talk about that sort of thing. Yeah, that's why, one of the reasons why we've taken that approach.
Yeah, no, good. Understand. I think as long as we've written the rules, I think we could just, it's a case of building them in, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we don't have any more questions at this stage. We might have beaten people into submission at this point, and I know that everybody's got to consume the artifacts and have a think about it. We're keen to kind of keep engaged with you, and hopefully you found this this session useful. If you do think of any questions and you really have a burning need to ask them, then drop a note to the PMO mailbox, and they will provide that feedback to the relevant people in the team. Oh, I think Jacqueline's popped up with another.
Yeah, I've just thought of another one.
So go for it.
I was involved in smart metering and as a DNO, and we often felt we were poor relations. We were hopped along and went to meetings where we spent hours and hours and hours listening to poor suppliers, and then we would get our say. This meeting is specifically targeted at DNOs and iDNOs. Will this carry on? Will we have our own forum where we can have, you know, our say, if you like, and understand what we are going to have to do, rather than a lot of it which doesn't apply to us because it's suppliers, which is understandable, but I only really care about us.
Yes, so that's a really good point. We tend to work on a constituency basis anyway. So where we can, there would be, because like this meeting, for example, is constituency based, because we know your views on this will be a different take on the plan than in others. So in terms of the plan, as I say, we have these. We'll do another one of these when we do round 2 consultation, Jacqueline. So once we put the round 2 plan out, we will have a repetition of this meeting with you guys. So you will have a chance to have your say specifically on a more rounded, more fleshed out plan. And as we've said, the delivery managers in your organisations are welcome to join the volunteer group, which is, you know, across the constituents, but it would be an opportunity also to have a voice and an inside track on the way the plan's being developed. So there's two ways: get on the inside with a wider group, and also we'll rerun this one at the start of consultation round 2. Yeah,
I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there are some other opportunities as well, Jacqueline. Sorry, Kate, I was going to say that.
Go ahead, Jason.
You know, I think we do make ourselves open to come and attend other meetings if it would help you for your development. So if, for example, for example, we do make ourselves available to come to INA meetings with Jenny and the group. Similarly, if you were convening a group under St Clement's or under ENA, I see we had Fungi on today, then you know, we could come and support collective meetings that you might be convening under different groups as well. So we're very open to come and support and help any sort of constituency type groups that you might pull together as well, Jacqueline.
Right, you're going to be sorry you said that, Jason. I'll hold you to that.
Never. I'm never sorry for increased stakeholder engagement, and you know, the more that we talk, the better we'll progress.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
we also
just
have
one thing to add on that. Sorry, just quickly. So, Jacqueline, what we've done on the testing side on the working groups there, while we haven't got a DNO stream or a supplier stream or anything like that, we've kind of chopped things up such that there are working groups for specific things. So, for example, there will be a SIT working group rather than a kind of generic testing thing. There'll be a SIT working group, and if, for example, it's decided amongst everybody plus St Clement's that St Clement's will come to SIT functional and that you guys won't, then you don't need to bother with that working group. All you need to worry about is coming to the qualification. You know, so it's kind of a little bit more, we've tried to focus them a bit more so that people can pick and choose, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's great, thank you.
The other thing I was going to say is that, of course, the PPC team have regular bilaterals with participants individually, and we often, people like myself, Kate, Jason, happy to hop on those calls as well. So if you're having a bilateral with Lauren's team and you particularly want to talk about the design or you want to talk about the plan, if she knows that, she'll bring one of us into those conversations. So, it's great to have a group discussion in a constituency like this, but sometimes you just want a bilateral where you want to have a more kind of detailed conversation about the challenges your organisation itself is having. And those bilaterals sometimes can be very helpful too. So I would encourage you also, when you have those conversations with the PPC team, to highlight the things you'd like to talk about, and maybe they can bring the right people along.
Oh, that's great. I will do that. I'm new to this, so I've got a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean, just one last thing, and then I promise I'll shut up, is we would very much welcome feedback, because one of our big things when we kind of embarked on this programme was we want to be more focused in engagement with participants. to absolutely avoid the things that you describe, where you sit in these endless meetings and 90% of it is not relevant to you. So we would welcome feedback on whether in fact you think we're succeeding with that or not. Really?
Thank you. This one hit the mark anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Nikki's got a hand up.
Yeah, afternoon all. Yeah, a bit like Jacqueline, I'm sort of new to the party, so my question might be a little strange. Alex touched upon CT metering earlier, and MPANs. So what are MPANs that are CT metered part of the MHHS program? Sorry if that's an obvious question, but I'm just sort of trying to get my bearings on it all.
Yes, absolutely. So you know, our scope is everything.
Yeah, okay.
And you know what we will need to do is to move even the ones under the existing half-hourly arrangements. We will need to move them over to the new half-hourly arrangements, basically.
So that's sort of getting rid of all the measurement classes, isn't it? My understanding, getting all the sorry.
I couldn't tell you all the details, but basically all MPANs will need to move, even those ones which are currently half-hourly settled. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, because I was just thinking, obviously, I work as part of our sort of P283 commissioning of CT metering team, and obviously we have close ties with the auditors, etc., who monitor us on commissioning of those metering systems. So I just need to think about the future on how we're going to work with them to get them audited. But that's fine, thank you.
Just one thing while we're talking about CT metering, there are a few BSc modification proposals around prioritising migration for different types of meter that are worth keeping an eye on as well, Nikki, and CT metering is one of those. So we can pick up separately if you'd like to know a bit more information around that.
So
yeah, that's brilliant, thanks.
Jason, did they get rejected last week by the panel?
I was on holiday last week, Alex,
Yes,
so I didn't pick up.
Yes.
I was as well and read it.
An agonised yes, but we are working on it.
I mean, I was going to talk to you guys about that whole approach to that phase 0, and I don't think it's part of your planning consultation here, so I didn't sort of want to say anything. But I think that whole process of doing that stage 0 beforehand is completely bonkers. You know, their timescales that they're talking about in those mods all just overlay your plans that you're showing here. They just need to be included in your MHHS plan and stop doing them as mods, to be honest. Well, I find it really confusing.
Yeah, I mean, we're as you know, Alex, we're kind of beholden to the result of the mods process as to whether we incorporate into our plan or not, really. So if people raise the mods, then they have a right to raise the mods and go through the process, and we have to take the output, really. But,
okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's something we're very conscious of, because you know, all that facilitation ahead of the start of migration is going to be really helpful, I think, and it does need to be done in a way that's simple.
I think it just needs to be coordinated with you guys.
Coordinated,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, yeah. I mean, the mod's correct in what it's saying. It just needs, this implementation needs to be part of your plan here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And all the other ones that are out there at the moment, you know, Rec Mod 32, CP 1558, the numbers are endless, aren't they? I mean, luckily, I think our St Clement's guys have got a good handle around them. Yeah. But if you're not careful, it'll just get very confusing.
They are mentioned in the RAID summary as external dependencies. So hopefully, if we haven't captured them all, you'll let us know. But we've tried to recognise the fact that there is the interdependency there on those items.
Yeah.
You did, Keith, didn't you? I think you ranked them as green, didn't you? And I would have put them a little bit more amber.
Well, tell us what you think. That's the important thing. Yeah.
I was gonna say the same. Really good to get the feedback on that, Alex, because you know CP 1558 is a good example, because there's an exercise to make the change, but then there's a data cleansing exercise that follows it that will have a material impact on the success of migration. So you know, these are the sorts of things we'd really like feedback on into the planning exercise, because for me it's a really important dependency, that data cleansing exercise.
It is, isn't it? And I complained at the rec change panel about the consequential rec mod 32, because it just turns around and gives it an open-ended make the changes, and then it sort of says someone else will tell you when all the data needs to be populated. And I said, it's just not really good enough, is it?
Okay, Emily's been patiently waiting, and I thought I saw Jen's hand for a brief moment before it went down again, but Emily.
Hey everyone, apologies, painfully basic question, I'm afraid. I just want to say you very kindly mentioned the MHS programme glossary. I'm looking through the website and I'm afraid I'm struggling to find it. Is there any chance anyone could potentially share the link to it, please?
I will do. I shared it in one of the chats earlier for one of the other briefings, so I'll
Yeah.
just dig it out for you.
Fantastic,
Emily.
thanks Jason.
Is it on the website or through the portal? Because I'm having problems with the portal because I need a special email address and I don't have one.
I'll post the link I've got, and then if that's not working, drop us a note back and we'll get you access.
Yeah,
Lovely,
It is
thank
on
you.
the portal, so yeah, you'll
Yeah, I
need the
thought so.
MHHS
Yeah, it's the portal.
login.
yeah. Any problems like that, PMO can sort them out. Okay, Jenny, did you think better of your question, or did you still have one?
I answered it myself, and I'm glad I did because it was a silly question. Thank you.
No, never mind. Right, does anybody else have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, well, we hope this. What did you think of the session? Do you think it was helpful to have it?
Yes. Very
Yeah,
helpful
really
to have.
useful, really useful.
Okay, good. Well, any follow-up, just let us know. If you want to get in contact with us, let the PMO know and they'll let us know. And please do your best with this round of consultation. We are counting on you and we need you for this. The more you can put into this, I think the better we'll collectively have as an output from this process. I think we've made that pretty clear. So it's a difficult time, but we appreciate your help and we appreciate your time today. So enjoy your evenings when you get there.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
very
Thank
much.
you,
Thanks, everyone.
bye.
Bye.